The first strike. The Ravagers came without warning. Humanity's first confirmation of alien life arrived in the form of plasma bombardment that turned New Mars colony into glass. The attack lasted exactly 17 minutes. When it was over, 2 million colonists were dead, and humanity's innocence died with them. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the viewport of the ESS Intrepid, watching the holographic replay of the attack for the 100th time. Her dark eyes reflected the ghostly images of destruction, but her expression remained composed. 20 years of military service had taught her how to hide her emotions, even as her heart raged at the senseless slaughter. "They expected us to surrender," she said to the assembled war council. "To break like so many species before us." Her voice carried across the command center, where Earth's highest-ranking military leaders had gathered. "Instead, we're going to show them why that was their first mistake." The Ravagers weren't used to resistance. Their entire strategy relied on shock and awe. Hit hard, hit fast, and watch their victims crumble. They'd done it to 12 other civilizations across the galaxy. Each time, the pattern was the same: one devastating strike, followed by immediate capitulation. Why waste resources fighting when the outcome was already determined? But humans had never been good at accepting predetermined outcomes. Within hours of the attack, every shipyard on Earth and Luna was running at full capacity. Civilian factories were converted to military production with unprecedented speed. Children's toy manufacturers began producing drone components. Beer breweries switched to manufacturing fuel cells. Humanity didn't just adapt, they evolved. "The enemy's ships are technically superior," General Marcus Wong announced, pointing to the tactical display. "Their weapons have longer range, their shields are stronger, and their FTL drives are faster." He paused, a grim smile crossing his weathered face. "But they've never faced an enemy who turned their own arrogance into a weapon." The first counterattack came 3 weeks after New Mars fell. The Ravagers had positioned a small garrison fleet in orbit, expecting only token resistance at most. What they got instead was Operation Falling Star. Earth's first wave wasn't warships at all. It was debris. Thousands of pieces of scrap metal, each barely larger than a basketball, launched from concealed mass drivers on Phobos. The Ravagers' advanced sensors dismissed them as space junk, right until the moment the debris revealed itself to be swarms of autonomous hunter-killer drones. The battle lasted 6 minutes. When it was over, the garrison fleet was in ruins, and humanity had their first victory. "They'll be back," Chen warned the council. "And next time, they won't underestimate us." But that's exactly what we're counting on. The Ravagers' response was predictable. They sent a full battle fleet, expecting to find a desperate resistance force. Instead, they found empty space. No ships, no stations, not even debris. New Mars colony appeared completely abandoned. It took them 3 days to realize that the entire colony had been turned into a trap. Underground fabricators had spent weeks producing specialized nanites. While the Ravagers' ships scanned for conventional threats, these microscopic machines were already infiltrating their hulls through engine exhaust ports and microscopic stress fractures. By the time they detected the threat, it was too late. The nanites didn't target critical systems that would have been too obvious. Instead, they began subtly altering sensor readings, introducing microscopic errors that grew larger over time. Navigation systems showed ships meters away from their actual positions. Targeting computers miscalculated by fractions of degrees. Small errors cascaded into critical failures. When Earth's actual attack fleet arrived, the Ravagers found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't properly target, while their own formations fell into chaos. Human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, exploited every mistake, every miscalculation. The battle turned into a rout. The mighty Ravager fleet, pride of their empire, was forced to retreat in disarray. Not because they were outgunned, but because humans had turned their own technological superiority into a weakness. "Send word to every colony, every outpost," Admiral Chen commanded as the last Ravager ships fled the system. "Humanity doesn't bow. We don't break, and we're just getting started. The message spread across human space like wildfire. From the mines of Europa to the research stations orbiting Alpha Centauri, humanity's response was uniform: defiance. They had taken the Ravagers' best punch and not only survived but punched back harder. But this was just the beginning. The real war was about to begin, and humanity would need every ounce of ingenuity, every scrap of determination to survive what was coming. Their weapons were off the charts. They've upgraded their shields, Rodriguez reported from her tactical station. Our previous countermeasures won't work. Chen allowed herself a small smile. They always adapt. That's why we gave them exactly what they expected to counter. The Ravager fleet advanced in textbook formation, their improved shields glowing with new frequencies designed to resist the disruption technology that had defeated them before. They had learned from their losses, adapted their technology, and prepared for every tactic humanity had previously shown. That was exactly what humanity had counted on. The first shot wasn't fired by either fleet. Instead, it came from behind the Ravager formation. Dozens of automated mining rigs, hidden in the debris field of a destroyed moon, activated simultaneously. But instead of firing conventional weapons, they unleashed streams of Silurian crystal shards, each one quantum entangled with the defense fleet's network. The crystals passed through the Ravager's shields as if they weren't there, because technically they weren't fully in normal space. Zen-theory quantum physics had taught humanity how to exist in multiple states of reality simultaneously. Phase 1 complete, Chen announced as the crystals embedded themselves in Ravager hull plating. Begin Phase 2. The defense fleet opened fire, not at the Ravager ships, but at seemingly empty space around them. The enemy commanders must have thought it was a sign of panic, of poor coordination. They pressed their attack, confident in their superior numbers and improved defenses. Then the quantum web activated. Every crystal shard became a point of quantum connection. The apparently missed shots from the defense fleet hadn't missed at all. They had been precisely aimed to create a lattice of energy around the Ravager formation. When the quantum web activated, that energy was instantly transmitted through the crystal network, bypassing shields entirely. Ravager ships began to lose power as their energy was redirected through quantum space. Their perfect formation began to break as ships struggled to maintain basic systems. But the enemy had not become the dominant force in the galaxy by being easily defeated. Even as their front lines faltered, their rear echelons launched a counterstrike of devastating proportions. Thousands of energy beams lanced out simultaneously, enough firepower to crack a planet. The defense fleet's shields lit up as they absorbed the massive assault. Shields at critical levels, Rodriguez called out. We can't take another barrage like that. We don't need to, Chen replied, because they just gave us exactly what we needed. Activate the Silurian matrix. The crystalline ships in the defense fleet began to glow with impossible brightness. The energy they had absorbed from the Ravager attack was being channeled, amplified, and redirected through the quantum web. What followed was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The combined power of the Ravager assault, multiplied by Silurian crystal matrices, enhanced by Zen-theory quantum physics, and guided by human precision, was turned back against them. The blast was visible from 3 systems away. When it was over, half the Ravager fleet had been reduced to atomic particles. But it wasn't over. The remaining enemy ships regrouped with frightening speed, launching waves of fighters and drones. They had lost their numerical superiority, but they were far from defeated. They still outnumber us 2-1, Wang observed. Chen's expression hardened. Numbers stopped mattering the day they attacked Earth. Now they learn why you don't corner a species that turns defeat into innovation. The battle that followed would be studied for centuries to come. Every time the Ravagers adapted, the Alliance adapted faster. When energy weapons proved ineffective, they switched to quantum-phased kinetic rounds. When those were countered, Volan bioships released clouds of microscopic organisms that ate through hull plating. Hour after hour, the battle raged. Ships on both sides fell by the hundreds. The space around Earth became a graveyard of broken vessels and shattered dreams. But through it all, humanity's greatest strength shone through. Not their weapons or their tactics, but their ability to unite different species, different technologies, different ways of thinking into something greater than the sum of its parts. As the last Ravager dreadnought fell silent, its mighty engines finally going dark, Admiral Chen looked out at the battlefield. The combined fleet had suffered heavy losses, but they had achieved what no one had thought possible. "Send word to all ships," she ordered, her voice carrying the weight of history. "The Ravagers have been defeated. Earth stands free. And we're not done yet." The message spread across the quantum network, then across conventional communications channels, and finally through faster-than-light relays to major defeat in over 1,000 years. In the aftermath, as recovery teams swarmed through the debris field, Dr. Paddle stood in her lab, already working on her next innovation. The Ravagers would adapt. They always did, but so would humanity. "The difference between us and them," she explained to a visiting Admiral Chen, "is that they see technology as something to perfect. We see it as something to reinvent." Chen smiled, remembering her own words from months ago. "They made a mistake thinking we'd break. But their bigger mistake was giving us time to innovate." Reports were already coming in from across human space. Other colonies had adopted similar strategies, turning seemingly harmless civilian technology into unexpected weapons. Terraforming equipment became atmospheric scramblers. Communication arrays were modified into system-wide sensor nets. The Ravagers had started this war expecting an easy victory over a primitive species. Instead, they had awakened humanity's greatest strength, the ability to adapt, to innovate, and to turn any tool into a means of survival. As Maya turned back to her work, a new alert flashed across her screens. Long-range sensors had detected more Ravager ships gathering at the edge of known space. They were learning, adapting their tactics. The next battle would be even harder. But humanity was ready. In labs and workshops across Earth and her colonies, thousands of minds were at work, each approaching the problem from different angles, each contributing to humanity's growing arsenal of innovations. The Ravagers thought they were fighting a war of conquest. They were about to learn they were fighting a war of innovation, and on that battlefield, humanity had no equal. The hidden strength. Ambassador Elena Santos walked through the crystalline halls of the Nexus station, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. 6 months ago, this diplomatic hub had been abandoned, its former occupants fleeing the Ravager advance. Now it hummed with activity again, but not in the way anyone had expected. In chambers designed for singular species, humans worked alongside beings they'd never imagined existing before the war. The station's advanced systems, originally built to keep different atmospheric requirements separated, now served as bridges between cultures. The Ravagers made one fundamental mistake. Elena explained to her aide as they approached the central chamber. They assumed that because they could break civilizations individually, no one would dare stand together. The central chamber had been transformed. Where once there were rigid diplomatic protocols and separate sections for each species, now there was organized chaos. Holographic displays showed battle plans and resource distributions. Representatives from a dozen species worked together, their differences forgotten in the face of a common enemy. The Silurians, a species of crystalline beings who had lost their homeworld to the Ravagers centuries ago, had discovered that their natural ability to refract energy worked perfectly with human shield disruption technology. The Volans, master geneticists who had hidden from the Ravagers for generations, found willing partners in human biotechnology firms. 6 months ago, these species wouldn't even acknowledge each other's existence. Ambassador Kral of the Silurians observed, his crystalline form catching the light. "Now we fight as one." Elena nodded, remembering the difficult early days. After humanity's successful defense of their territory, other species had watched with interest. But centuries of conditioning under Ravager dominance had made them hesitant to act. It was Dr. Patel's willingness to share her shield disruption technology that first broke the ice. When the Silurians saw humans freely offering what could have been kept as a crucial military advantage, they realized this young species was different from any they had encountered before. "The Ravagers unite through fear," Alina said, addressing the gathered representatives. "We unite through hope. They demand submission. We offer collaboration." On the main display, tactical updates streamed in from across the galaxy. The Ravagers were facing something they had never encountered: a coordinated resistance. Their tactics, perfected against isolated opponents, faltered against combined strategies they had never trained for. Volan's bioships, enhanced with human AI systems, slipped past their patrols. Silurian crystal technology, integrated into human weapon platforms, bypassed their strongest defenses. Each species brought their own strengths, their own innovations, and humanity helped weave them together into something greater than the sum of its parts. "They called us primitive." Admiral Chen's hologram spoke from the tactical display. "But while they were perfecting their weapons, we were perfecting something far more powerful: the ability to work together, to combine different ways of thinking." The evidence of this collaboration was visible throughout the station. Silurian crystal matrices powered human computer systems, multiplying their processing power. Volan organic technology merged with human mechanical engineering, creating hybrid systems that defied conventional analysis. But perhaps the most surprising development came from the Zenthari, a species of energy beings who had been observing the galaxy in silence for millennia. They had never interfered in physical conflicts before, considering them beneath their notice. But humanity's approach to the war, the emphasis on innovation and cooperation rather than mere destruction, had intrigued them. "Your species thinks differently," the Zenthari representative, a shifting pattern of light and energy, communicated directly to Alina's mind. "You see connections where others see barriers. You find strength in diversity where others demand uniformity." The Zenthari offered something unprecedented: access to their understanding of quantum mechanics, which they had never shared with any physical species before. Combined with human ingenuity and the technical capabilities of other allies, this knowledge opened up entirely new frontiers in warfare. "The Ravagers believe they are fighting a war of conquest," Alina addressed the council. "But we are fighting a war of ideas. Every victory we achieve shows more species that resistance is possible. Every innovation we share proves that we are stronger together than apart." Reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Species that had submitted to Ravager rule for generations were beginning to resist. The Alliance's successes had sparked something that centuries of oppression had nearly extinguished: hope. In her private moments, Alina wondered if this had been humanity's true purpose in the galaxy, not just to resist the Ravagers, but to show others that resistance was possible, to demonstrate that differences could be strengths rather than weaknesses. The Ravagers had not yet unleashed their full might. Everyone knew that. Their empire spanned thousands of systems, and they had only committed a fraction of their forces to this conflict. But they were facing something they had never encountered before: a galaxy that was learning not to fear them. As Alina reviewed the latest diplomatic requests, 3 more species seeking to join the Alliance, she smiled. The Ravagers had sought to break humanity's will to fight. Instead, they had helped forge something that would change the galaxy forever. "Send word to Earth," she instructed her aide. "Tell them Phase 3 can begin. The galaxy is ready." Above the station, ships of various designs moved in perfect formation. Human ingenuity, Silurian crystal tech, Volan bioengineering, and Zenthari quantum physics, all working in harmony. The sight would have been impossible just months ago. The real war was about to begin, but for the first time in galactic history, it would not be fought by separate species struggling alone. It would be fought by a united galaxy, awakened to its own potential by humanity's refusal to submit. Breaking point. The warning came from the furthest reaches of human space. A quantum entanglement transmission, barely a whisper of data, but its message changed everything. They're all coming. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the ESS Defiant, watching as the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history took formation around Earth. Human ships flew alongside crystalline Silurian vessels that seemed to bend light itself. Voldan bioships pulsed with artificial life, while Xanthari quantum vessels phased in and out of normal space. The Ravagers have committed 90% of their total fleet strength, General Wong reported, his hologram flickering above the tactical display. Over 10,000 capital ships. They're done testing us. This is their full might. Chen nodded grimly. The enemy had finally realized that their usual tactics wouldn't work. No more prodding attacks, no more testing defenses. They were coming to end this, once and for all. Let them come, she said quietly. Everything we've built has been for this moment. The combined fleet had positioned itself in a seemingly conventional defense formation around Earth. To anyone familiar with standard tactical doctrine, it looked like a desperate last stand. But standard tactics had died the day humanity decided to rewrite the rules of warfare. Dr. Patel's voice came through on a secure channel. The quantum web is ready. Every ship in the fleet is connected. This was humanity's greatest innovation yet. A combination of Xanthari quantum physics, Silurian crystal technology, and human AI systems. Every ship in the defense fleet was linked at the quantum level, able to coordinate and react as a single organism. The first wave of Ravager ships emerged from hyperspace exactly where predicted. Their formation was perfect, their numbers overwhelming. Energy readings from the Ravagers had never failed to conquer a species before. Now they would learn why challenging humanity's will to survive was the biggest mistake they could have made. In her quarters later that night, Admiral Chen studied the latest intelligence reports. The Ravagers were massing a fleet unlike anything seen before. Their next attack would make the first look like a skirmish. But as she read the reports, she smiled. Because while the Ravagers were gathering their ships, humanity was doing what it did best, innovating, adapting, and preparing surprises that would change the face of warfare forever. The real question wasn't whether humanity would survive. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what humanity would become in the crucible of this war. Operation Thunderbolt. Dr. Maya Patil never planned to be a weapon designer. Before the Ravagers came, she'd been developing clean energy solutions for deep space colonies. Now she stood in the heart of Earth's most secure research facility, watching as her latest creation took shape. "It's ready," she announced to the gathered military observers. The device floating in the containment field looked deceptively simple, a sphere roughly the size of a beach ball, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. General Wong stepped forward, his expression skeptical. "You're telling me this thing can shut down a Ravager dreadnought?" Maya smiled. "Better, it can turn their own shields against them." The Ravagers' greatest strength had always been their energy shield technology. No conventional weapon could penetrate them. But Maya and her team had discovered something fascinating about how those shields worked. They didn't just block energy, they absorbed and redistributed it. "Their shields are like a perfect circuit," Maya explained, bringing up a holographic diagram. "When we attack them, the energy from our weapons gets absorbed and channeled away. But what happens if we introduce a recursive feedback loop into that circuit?" The answer, as the Ravagers were about to discover, was devastation. Operation Thunderbolt began 3 months after humanity's first victory. The Ravagers had assembled their largest fleet yet, over 300 capital ships, including 5 of their dreaded world breakers. They emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their shields forming an impenetrable wall of energy. They never saw the small stealth pods that had been waiting for them, each carrying one of Maya's devices. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the newly commissioned ESS Defiant as the operation unfolded. "All ships hold position," she ordered. "Let them come to us." The Ravager fleet advanced confidently, their sensors detecting the human battle line waiting ahead. Their commanders likely thought humanity's previous victory had been a fluke, a lucky break that wouldn't be repeated. Then Maya's devices activated. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The Ravager ships continued their advance, their shields glowing with their characteristic blue-green energy. But inside those shields, something was changing. Each time their shield systems cycled, the recursive algorithms in Maya's devices added a tiny deviation to the energy flow. These deviations built upon each other, growing exponentially with each cycle. The perfect circuit began to falter. Energy spike detected in the enemy formation, reported Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, her fingers dancing across the tactical display. Their shield harmonics are destabilizing. Chen nodded grimly. Now they learn why you don't underestimate human scientists. The collapse, when it came, was spectacular. Shield after shield began to overload, the excess energy having nowhere to go but back into the ships themselves. The Ravagers' greatest defense became their undoing. But humanity wasn't done surprising them yet. As the enemy fleet reeled from the shield failures, the second phase of Operation Thunderbolt began. From behind Earth's moon emerged something the Ravagers had never seen before: orbital mining rigs, converted into massive railguns. They had been humanity's secret weapon, developed and built in plain sight, because who would suspect mining equipment to be a threat? The rigs opened fire, launching specially designed projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. Without their shields, the Ravager ships were vulnerable. The kinetic impacts tore through their hulls like tissue paper. "This is impossible," one of the captured Ravager commanders would later say. "Your species is too young, too primitive." But that was exactly why humanity had won. They weren't bound by centuries of traditional warfare doctrine. They didn't fight the way the Ravagers expected because they didn't know they were supposed to. The battle lasted less than an hour. When it was over, the mighty Ravager fleet was in ruins. Humanity had not just survived. They had dealt the Empire its first. Every corner of the galaxy. The undefeatable had been defeated. The invincible had fallen. But more importantly, the galaxy had seen what was possible when species worked together, when different civilizations combined their strengths instead of fighting alone. The war wasn't over. The Ravagers still held thousands of systems, and their defeat at Earth would only make them more dangerous. But something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. Hope had returned, and with it the understanding that the future belonged not to those who could dominate others, but to those who could bring them together. A new dawn. 1 year after the Battle of Earth, the galaxy was unrecognizable, not because of destruction, but because of transformation. Ambassador Elena Santos stood in the newly constructed Chamber of Unity, once the heart of the Ravager Empire's central command. The massive structure had been rebuilt, its oppressive architecture transformed into something entirely new. Crystal spires merged with organic structures, while quantum-shifted spaces allowed species from every environment to interact freely. "We didn't just defeat them," she told the gathered representatives of over 30 species. "We showed the galaxy a better way." The fall of the Ravagers hadn't been swift or simple. After their defeat at Earth, they had retreated to their core systems, expecting to regroup and return stronger. But they had failed to understand what their defeat had truly meant. Across their empire, subjugated species rose up, not with violence or revenge, but with something far more powerful: hope and unity. Centuries of oppression had created hidden networks of resistance, and humanity's victory had shown them all what was possible. Dr. Maya Patel, now head of the Interspecies Technology Exchange, pulled up a holographic display of the galaxy. Points of light showed the spread of shared innovation. Human determination combined with Silurian crystal tech. Volan bioengineering merged with Zenthari quantum physics. The Ravagers built their empire on hoarding knowledge. She explained to a group of young scientists from a dozen species, "We're building the future on sharing it." The evidence was everywhere. Former Ravager warships, stripped of their weapons, had been converted into deep space research vessels. Their crews were as diverse as the galaxy itself, humans working alongside former enemies, each contributing their unique perspectives to solving the challenges of space exploration. Admiral Chen, now Fleet Commander of the United Species Defense Force, watched from the observation deck as ships of all designs moved through the quantum gates that connected formerly isolated systems. The military woman in her noted their defensive capabilities, but she smiled at what they represented. They thought warfare was about destroying your enemy. She mused to her mixed species command staff. We showed them it's about protecting what matters. The remnants of the Ravager civilization had been offered a choice, not submission or extinction, but integration. Many had refused, retreating to isolated pockets of space, but others, particularly younger generations, had chosen to join the new galactic society. It wasn't their technology that failed them, General Wong observed during a strategic planning session. It was their inability to imagine a different way of existing. Humanity's influence had spread far beyond military innovation. Earth's long history of different cultures learning to coexist, despite their differences, became a model for interspecies cooperation. The concept of strength through diversity, once dismissed as a weakness by the Ravagers, was now recognized as the foundation of galactic stability. The Nexus Station, where the Alliance had first formed, had become a symbol of this new era. Its halls buzzed with activity as species that had once been bitter enemies worked together on projects that would have been impossible alone. The humans taught us something profound. The Zenthari representative communicated during a council session. The universe is too vast and too wonderful for any one species to comprehend alone. Only by combining our perspectives can we truly understand it. Even the physical boundaries between species began to blur. Volan bioengineering and human medical science created new ways for different species to interact. Silurian crystal technology and Zenthari quantum physics opened up entirely new forms of communication. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy viewed conflict itself. The Ravagers had seen warfare as the ultimate expression of power. The new galactic society saw it as a failure of imagination. We still maintain our defenses, Alina explained to a gathering of new member species. But our real strength isn't in our weapons. It's in our ability to work together, to see challenges as opportunities for collaboration rather than conquest. A year after the battle, Earth had changed too. The planet had become a hub of interstellar culture and commerce. Alien architecture blended with human designs. Children of different species played together in parks where quantum fields allowed them to interact safely despite their different environmental needs. In universities across Earth, students learned not just human history, but galactic history. They studied not just Earth sciences, but the combined knowledge of dozens of civilizations. The pursuit of knowledge had replaced the pursuit of power as the driving force of society. The Ravagers had intended to break humanity's will to resist. Instead, they had catalyzed something unprecedented. A galactic civilization based not on domination, but on cooperation. Not on fear, but on hope. As Alina prepared for another day of diplomatic meetings, she received a message that made her smile. A group of former Ravager worlds had petitioned to join the United Species Alliance. Their reason? They had seen how much more their civilization could achieve through cooperation than conquest. They tried to teach us that the galaxy was too dangerous for anything but strength, she told her staff. We taught the galaxy that true strength comes from working together. The war had ended, but humanity's influence on the galaxy was just beginning. They had shown that innovation wasn't just about creating new weapons, but about finding new ways to solve problems. That determination wasn't just about refusing to submit, but about refusing to stop trying to make things better. As the sun set on another day in this new galaxy, ships of all designs moved through the quantum gates, carrying beings of all species. They weren't just exploring space anymore, they were exploring possibilities. And in doing so, they were creating something the Ravagers had never imagined possible, a future where the galaxy's diversity was its greatest strength.